it is time to engage. And today we are talking, after a Thanksgiving long weekend, about the Orville's newest episode, New Dimensions. And we've got no Discovery to talk about because it doesn't come back to the new year. So it makes it a really nice opportunity to compare this episode of the Orville with the history of Star Trek. And there are some specific Star Trek The Next Generation parallels that are going on in this. And I'm really looking forward to... Oh, yeah. So I'm really looking forward to digging into this with Sonia, great big fan, and classic Trek It or Wreck It panel Trekkie, and Vanya, also a classic panel Trekkie. This is the OG right here. These are the three that started it all, and the dream team is back together, guys. It's great. And I'm Matt. Thanks for joining us. So yes, let's get into this episode that... I gotta say, the Orville is sometimes really great with its humor, and it balances, and it just works perfectly, and other times it's uneven and weird. But this one... I felt like it balanced. What did you think about the comedy in this one?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it kind of lost its way a little, like, what is it, last episode or something like that? But now it's back, like, to that balance that it worked so hard to get to at the beginning, and then I was like, oh, it got there, and then it slipped a little, and now we returned to it.
Feels like it's back. Sonia, you agree?
I laughed out loud.
I heard you laughing out loud. It was great.
Yaffin.
Yes.
And Boris's Colin.
Oh my God.
And then the Jane Austen reference.
Yeah.
Just really funny, witty writing.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Jane Austen reference because we have been harping on the Orville for its like constant 20th and 21st century media jokes. And we had not one but two 17th century, 18th century like
references.
We were talking about Flatland, which is a nice 18th century author, and we were talking about Jane Austen, 18th century author. Like, it was pretty cool to see the way that they dug right into other time periods. So it's not just Seinfeld that is timeless. Maybe Jane Austen makes it, another 400 years.
Can I say I also laughed when I shouldn't have laughed? It was a very Anne Jean Roddenberry moment.
What was that?
The opening where they ate the They're basically, he's not a shapeshifter, but he could have...
Where they basically ate the almost Odo?
Yeah. And, that's not how you treat a species. It's different from you. It goes again.
It was an incredible amount of racism in this episode, which was really interesting. I thought that was quite a neat parallel.
They corrected it all, and I knew that was going to happen. That's why I laughed.
Well, and it's interesting because I think it's a good time to get into this. The sort of racial parallels of, like, someone who is in line for the position and has, like, all the qualifications necessary, and then picking a human who just does not want it, has absolutely no reason to be put in that position, and then for the minority to be, like, completely overlooked was a very interesting situation. And it also had the extra layer of a person of color as humans looking at this and being like, okay, so we've got our white captain and our white first officer who decide that this person of color who 400 years ago would have been, would have been the sort of
minority.
The like 20th century affirmative action would have pushed this person into a position they wouldn't necessarily have.
Yeah, we're approaching it from our time and looking at it and being like, when he's like upset that he's not getting it over Lamar, you're kind of like, yeah, but like in our time, Lamar wouldn't have thought of that.
That's right.
Although at the same time, the Selayan has been given a position of, like, that maybe a 26-year-old shouldn't necessarily have, but there's Alara on the bridge. And so it's interesting to watch the way they specifically in the pilot referred to it as something that could be construed as affirmative action. Like, oh yeah, Selayans don't show up here very much, so we rocketed you to the top of the command. And it's like, whoa, that's a really interesting thing. Computer?
Derek is saying that this episode felt like the second or third episode of Voyager when Janeway needed a new chief engineer for Voyager.
Yes, it's called Parallax. And he actually, it's a human that is completely qualified and has been there, and she's a Maquis and also half Klingon. So it's, Chakotay wants to put her in charge position, and basically, Janeway's kind of like, how can I push somebody who's not as qualified, who hasn't gone through the academy, to the front of the line kind of thing. So they're very similar episodes.
And it was interesting because that was when we got to see Voyager figuring out how to select a chief engineer. But when you look at the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation, they did not cast a Scotty. there was nobody who was going to be that sort of stand-in for Scotty in this new version of Star Trek. Because Roddenberry had this idea that by the 24th century, 23rd century, there wouldn't be a need for everything to be separated into silos. It would all be integrated, so there wouldn't be a chief engineer. But they needed 4 different people to be chief engineer in the first season alone, and they were like, oh shit, we need a chief engineer.
Right.
And then, completely off-screen, completely in between seasons, the like helmsman from the bridge, just the next episode, when you look at the neutral zone, the guy's wearing red, and he's just like, tappy, tappy, tap. And the very next episode, the child in season 2, it's like, Chief Engineer Geordi La Forge, and he's got like an extra pip, and you're like, no, at no time did Geordi show any, like, affinity or aptitude beyond anyone else's to be chief engineer. But there he is. And it's interesting, because I feel like everything about this episode came about because Brendan Braga was just like chatting with Seth MacFarlane about this time that they were like, yeah, well, we just upgraded somebody to that role, and we never discussed why.
Right.
And then this episode came out of a conversation like that, because it feels like it answered every question I ever had
about
in between season 1 and season 2, where Geordi becomes...
Even when Lamar says Lieutenant Commander, right? Like, and he says the word, like, he's like, gives his new rank, and you're kind of like,
Geordi La Forge. Oh, right.
yeah, you're kind of like,
oh, sorry, not
that's what we
Lamar.
were missing between the season 1 and season 2. And just to say, okay, this is his new rank.
and the timing almost works exactly the same. It's off by 2 episodes from being the next season. So it's like, this is at the very end of season 1 of watching him tappity-tap all season, and then for season 2, he's going to be chief engineer. It's just so interesting the way that, there was never a time in the first season of TNG, even in Arsenal of Freedom, which is like arguably a very Geordi-centric episode. There was never a point where you're like, that guy should be chief engineer.
Well, he's showing that leadership in that one where, it's like, he could be in charge of people.
Of
he
a
could
thing.
Manage people.
But there's no reason to think it would be engineering.
Right,
which is the interesting thing. And the funny thing is, in the Orville, we get Majority Rule, which is our Lamar-centric episode, and at no point do you get the idea that he should be in charge of people, least of all engineering.
Exactly, yes. Yes, he doesn't, it's hard to take him seriously in that episode. What I found interesting, you were talking about how not only are we looking at it from our point of view today, but they're also creating from, based on what's happening in society today. And I'm thinking about in America and Donald Trump, and I want to say this, I want to be very clear here. The people, the media presents as his followers, and the way they talk about them. It's interesting when Lamar was talking about how he grew up in a place where he had to hide his
anti-intellectual.
Yes, and I thought, that's interesting. That's how a lot of Trump's followers are portrayed.
That there's this idea that people are afraid of.
American.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's not the people that the media and that is being.
That like anti-intellectual movement.
Looking down on progressing intellectually is like a good thing.
Or like being educated or being an expert. That's the incredible thing. Like there's a battle happening right now in the media, and it's in a lot of North America and really Europe as well, where it's like, experts must be wrong. And it's like, no, experts are the people who have studied so much about this one thing and should be listened to. And it's funny, because right now there's someone running in the States, I think, for office that is doing it on a scientific platform because she's a scientist. And she is so sick of watching, like, buffoon Republicans and Democrats try to talk about science and have no friggin' clue because they're, like, barely lawyers or, like, people who are not qualified to lead in any way. And it's like, I believe that snowballs mean that global warming's not happening. And you're like, oh, right. We need science in this room bad.
It was all about it was a lot to do with competence this episode as well. Captain, please go.
No, that's what Star Trek is. It's competency.
That's
right. Like, you're like, these people know what they're doing.
Those people are so smart and able.
Like on every other show that you watch, like a science fiction show or whatever, you somebody gets hurt or they get bit by something or whatever, and then they hide it. Like on Star Trek, it's like the one show you can come to, and then somebody got bit, and they run to sick bay, and they go, look what happened to me. You know what I mean? You're like, that's a good, smart thing to do.
Absolutely. Computer?
Jeff, just making some comparisons here. Promotions on screen: Cisco, Worf, Paris, Tuvok. Promotions off screen: Geordi, Air, ...
Right? It's like they realized early that it was weird. They're like, oh, we should not do this again. It's like the way that they pretended that Chekhov was always on the bridge.
Right.
He was always in rotation, just for some reason, the shifts we were covering in episodes, Chekhov was like playing racquetball or something. But, and because for some reason they pretended that Khan ever met Chekhov in Star Trek 2, and you're like, you guys were never in the same season of television. But, it's like, Geordi, yeah, sure, you always had some kind of, aptitude for science.
Yeah, it is.
Let's put you
Warp
here.
drives?
Yeah, right? You told
Some
people
warp drives?
you made the warp drive go places. You should go down there and, run the show. And it's really interesting that they went through 4 different engineers in TNG, and very, very rarely did anyone show up twice. There was a chief engineer in Arsenal of Freedom who rolls on up, and it's this white boy with 2 pips.
Yeah.
And he's a lieutenant junior grade at that time when Geordi is technically outranked by the chief engineer, and they're like having this battle back and forth.
He's the worst. That guy's the worst.
Yeah, that guy was a real dick. And then it's interesting in this that Yaphet and Lamar didn't have as much of a technical power struggle, not a competency power struggle. It was like that guy played a really gross prank on me that's brutal.
Right.
That is as bad a thing as you could do to someone like me. And it was interesting that I always wondered what happened if Odo separated and grabbed a piece of himself.
Right.
And the idea that Yaphet was like, yeah, it's not sentient, but I have a sense of where my piece is.
Yeah,
It's dark.
Yeah, it's
dank.
cold.
Yeah. Yeah, and then as soon as Bortus came in and was like, I'm having digestive issues, I'm like, oh no.
I did like the pacing of that, of how quickly that turned around, because I didn't want it to be dragged out where,
Yeah, this is not a plot. It's just a gag.
Yeah.
That was good. Although I was really hoping there was going to be a gag about the gumdrops. Because it's like, you're offering a jelly candy to a gelatinous being. There's a gag happening, right? And then nothing happened. I find the Orville, misses obvious gags sometimes.
Right.
And it's like, maybe they were in there and then didn't work for pacing.
Yeah, they tried to do too much.
That's the tricky thing about comedy. Comedy is way harder than drama, because drama, you're extend the tension, no big deal. But comedy, it's like, if that joke doesn't hit, you gotta lose it, and sometimes you're structurally missing things that would have been obviously there. But I feel like this episode did a pretty good job of pulling together a bunch of different threads, because not only did we have Grayson helping Mercer get the gig, and then Grayson trying to help Lamar get the gig, we also had this really neat 2-dimensional universe.
Let's talk about that.
Really cool.
I've never seen anything like that in Star Trek that I can remember.
So it was,
yeah.
and it looked like a combination of a pinball machine. At first, I went pinball machine, and also I can't think of the word now. Board.
Like a computer chip.
Computer chip, yes.
It felt like Tron.
That's
which was interesting. Although
but also
the thing about it being 2-dimensional is that I feel like the Orville would have technically been crushing everything in its path.
As I was watching it, I was like, Matt's gonna say something very it's not gonna quite work for him.
Yeah, it looked beautiful, but I'm pretty sure the Orville murdered so many 2-dimensional beings, just steamrolling through that.
I could not stop thinking about that. I'm
oh. But I feel like visually the physics felt like a really cool representation of what 3-dimensional beings in 2-dimensional space would look like.
Sure, yeah.
As long as the 3-dimensional being wasn't crushed. And then it was neat to watch the shuttlecraft get flat as Mercer's terrible catchphrase. It's
let's get flat. But I also love their explanations about being bigger in the space, the Doctor Who reference, and then the garbage can, and then the Snoopy.
Those were great. And it really begs the question, if one 50-year science fiction thing from our lifetime exists in the Orville, does the other one? Does Star Trek exist in the Orville? Because we've heard now about Doctor Who. I mean, Snoopy obviously would exist. Why not? Sesame Street exists, and Kermit the Frog exists. Everything Jim Henson makes exists. But does Star Trek exist? I mean,
and were they influenced by it so much so more than we are?
Well, I mean,
that would be a great episode.
I would love it if CBS or Paramount would license to Fox just enough Star Trek IP to have an episode where we get to talk about that. That would be beautiful. Although on the topic, this is breaking away from the Orville and talking about Star Trek for a moment. Did you hear that Quentin Tarantino has a concept for a Star Trek movie, and right now J.J. Abrams is like, that's a great idea, let's make that. And so there's like a ton of people who are like trying to put together screenwriters to build this idea that Tarantino has. It's weird.
Interstellar bastards.
What are they
gonna
Interstellar bastards. Oh, I that was solid.
Yeah, man.
Bastards.
You nailed it.
But, yeah, I wonder.
I wonder what could it be?
I don't know. Does he want to direct it?
I think he wants to direct it. JJ wants to produce it, and I mean, because the thing is, Tarantino's a bit of a free agent right now because he's not doing anything for the Weinsteins anymore. He's doing his next movie with Sony, which means if Paramount wants to work with him, it's like he can go to different places because he has no one to be loyal to because the person he was loyal to was a monster. So, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Anyway, let's swing it back to the Orville and talk about the way it wrapped up for the characters. Because I must say, I didn't know whether this was going to be a moral tale about how you shouldn't force someone into a round hole if they're a square peg and they want to be that way, and that Yaphet is the competent one for the job, and they're, you know, I have several gelatinous friends, like all those things. If we were going to be able to just sort of shrug that off and do the right thing and hire the person who's right for the job, or will it be about, you know, the cocoon Lamar is in and he emerges as a beautiful butterfly chief engineer? Like, what was going to be the morality play? What did you think, Sonia? Were we going to see Yaphet or Lamar in your mind as the chief engineer?
I thought it was going to be Lamar.
Yeah?
I really did.
What about you? What did you think?
I also thought it would be Lamar. I thought it would be a mistake to kind of start that and then retract it after.
But I wish that they had ended the Yaphet storyline better. I think even though a couple of great jokes came from the Mercer, you know, getting a leg up
with his wife,
with his job. I thought that a couple of great jokes came from that. I thought it took up time. Maybe if they hadn't spent too much time on that storyline, they could have spent more time on the whole Yaphet thing. Because when Mercer said, I have a lot of gelatinous friends, I thought, this could be an interesting episode about how to deal with racism. But I think the Mercer story took time away from it. Maybe it wouldn't have worked as well. Maybe they needed that storyline because that had to do with competence, and that had to do with Mercer's decisions and what you just said, like really the promotion of someone who is worthy, but maybe not have earned it. That you know, interesting struggle.
Yeah, to me it was almost exactly like Parallax, because in both instances. In Parallax, B'Elanna hurts. Like, she breaks the nose of the guy that would have been like the interim, like, chief engineer. She breaks his nose. So both of them have hurt the person that is the next in line. Like, Lamar's hurt, you know, Yaphet, and she hurt Carrie or whatever. So they were on the same trajectory. And I thought, oh man, it's probably going to go the same way. And they both have the second officer is the same person that pushes them.
For him,
and they don't even know that they want it.
Yeah.
In both instances, they don't know that they want it. It's almost exact. It's parallax. It's parallax. And I had a conversation about the episode 2, the idea that somebody might not want something, or they might not think they want something, or sometimes you have the abilities but you still don't want to do it because you're just like, I just want to have a beer, right?
And pass out.
Then I was saying, well, I almost think that most of the time that's based in fear, right? Like, most of the time I would say, probably not always, but I think it is based in, like, if I take those risks. And for him, he actually did have a reason. It was fear. It was that fear of being, like, overly intellectual, not fitting in.
Yeah, it's a really ingrained, deep-seated fear that he had of being rejected by people because he was different. And so he continued coasting on that, hanging out with people who were actually dumb. In order to, like, blend in with the dumb people. And it's very interesting. And I like the fact that the way he was found out was by being such a shit disturber. That Grayson's just like, okay, whoa. And that moment where she's so surprised at what she's discovered, it was like, oh, what'll it be?
Yeah, because Janeway even reads into B'Elanna's Wrecker too, and she sees that she went to the academy too. She quit, right? And she's like, why did you quit? So she's trying to dig deeper into why a person isn't. I think another theme is like why someone isn't progressing. Like somebody with that has talent are they not given those chances? You know what I mean? Are they put in a position that it doesn't allow them to be themselves, their full selves?
Yeah.
Like Riker turned down a couple of commands.
Yeah. In fact, Riker turned down a command before the Next Generation began.
Yes.
Oh, that's right.
So he could be on the Enterprise.
He was like, this would be a great opportunity for me to be on the Enterprise. And then he spent 7 bloody years and 4 movies. So he was on the Enterprise for like 12 years.
Yeah, and he was offered command during.
That's right. And
during,
he turned it down.
Yeah. And it's really interesting the way. I mean, you need to keep your show together, but it would be neat to watch people leave the show. I mean, I loved all the moments that we had Captain Sulu in the movies.
Yeah.
Because that was so interesting to watch, you know, not the second in command, but like the third or fourth in command roll up in his own ship and be an important part of a scene, be an important part of how something, and especially being handed the Excelsior, like being handed a flagship is really cool.
It's pretty badass.
It is what we love about Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's always going to work out.
Yeah.
It's always going to work out. That's why we go there. But it's all, there's the added brilliance of all the science and then the great relationships.
Yeah.
Let's say that's something that was here too in this episode.
Yeah, the relationship between that Isaac was trying to cultivate by petting. Oh my God! Are we bonding?
Scream laugh.
It was just so funny.
The cut of how he's just next to him is,
and he's just sitting there and a little cuddle. It was a really beautiful sequence, the way it pulled out, and then Isaac was just trying to figure out what was going on. And Isaac had some really lovely little moments in here, where he got to play with Finn's kids again, which was great.
The scene with Lamar.
Yeah, he got to recognize that he was actually
good at what he's doing, because he was standing with the other smartest guy in the ship. And the two of them were working together and came up with this brilliant idea. And then it was really interesting to watch Yaphet's suggestion completely, be the reason that 3 of his colleagues were like, Yaphet, don't screw up again. And it was like, whoa, if it wasn't for Yaphet's idea, none of this would have worked. You'd all be like krill juice. It would not have gone well. Yeah, like that was Yaphet saved your asses. Although I did enjoy Bravalach. I thought he was an interesting character with his noodles.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that generation has so many Bravalachs. That gag was great. And it was interesting the way the effect of the ship going into 2-dimensional space, getting squashed flat, and then coming out the other end was quite a beautiful effect. I mean, it was a different squash than we see at other times, but I imagine they tried that effect vertically, and it just didn't look as cool, so they went horizontally. It didn't bother me. I'm mentioning it now, but it didn't really bother me. Although what did bother me was when they said that they weren't reading any power signatures on it, and all the lights were still on in the ship. It's like, so that just glows in the dark, I guess. No power signature, glows in the dark. So some things, I guess, pop back better than others, but light bulbs are totally fine. Light bulbs are fine. I don't know about that. So one thing that I thought was really interesting about this episode as well was that we did weave Finn's kids back into it just for that moment and back out. Because, if you're watching this as standalone episodes, that doesn't feel strange. But if you're watching it in order, it's just another one of the bits about how the Orville is more complex storytelling than The Next Generation or mostly Voyager. I mean, technically Voyager is a little bit closer to home, a little bit closer every episode, but it doesn't really make a big impact on the storytelling.
Sure.
But in TNG, it was very specifically still doing watch it in any order you want.
Right.
DS9 was doing its own story arcing thing.
Yeah, that's right.
But,
in really strange ways.
In strange ways, which is interesting. I feel like the parallels are maybe more Voyager than any other series of Star Trek, where we're getting to see elements progress, maybe even Enterprise, where you would honestly tell if something was out of order if you saw Isaac hanging out with Finn's kids after you saw this episode. Right. You'd be like, oh, but he already knows them. Like little tiny things would be strange. Whereas even moments with the wacky egg-headed guy who loves refinishing furniture
Oh, yeah.
and brunch.
Yeah.
His character has like popped up a few more times.
Yeah, he's the elevator.
He's
Yeah.
the elevator music guy.
Yeah.
So like we're seeing these little. I'm wondering if Palovis is going to show up watering plants in future episodes. There he is.
I love that.
I like this element of how we're watching Ed not quite be the greatest captain
Sure,
yet,
right.
because he's trying so hard,
Yeah.
but he still doesn't know everyone's name. There's hundreds of people on this ship.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that like she is so much more confident than
Yeah.
Ed. Like there was a moment when I had a moment where when he got on the shuttle and he's like, I'm gonna go and like make the sacrifice, and she was like, but what happens? And she was like worried. I'm like, don't look worried, girl.
Don't be too worried.
We
You'll
got
be in charge of this ship.
Yeah, no one will even.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll be like, wow,
She was worried about him
has
screwing
gone
up,
up.
maybe.
Yeah.
She's worried about him screwing up.
Just don't mess this up. I don't want to die.
Right, yeah, exactly. Because I was like, girl, you don't have anything to worry about.
You'll be fine.
But in the other shows, they never put the captains in situations where you would know they don't know everybody's name, right? They
That's
never
true,
did that.
yeah.
They sort of set them up for success
Sure.
all the time.
Nor
Yeah,
do you
yeah,
ever
sure.
let the captain get in that kind of danger.
Yeah.
Like there are much more Kirkish with him than they are Picardish or
Yeah.
Janeway-ish. I mean, Sisko would let himself get into trouble pretty often.
Yeah.
But I mean, he
was on
punched
a
Q.
different-
Like he would do whatever he
Yeah,
wanted.
he's on a different frontier there.
Yeah,
Right?
but I feel like Mercer really gets the chance to like be 50% of the OA team to a cruise ship.
Right.
Like really dangerous things that Kirk would totally have done.
Right.
And it's neat to get to see that they're taking those like original series elements and the Next Generation elements, but then also the Voyager Enterprise elements. I'm wondering if they'll ever get to the point where they tell like a story arc, where that like they did in DS9. I
Right.
imagine it would take seasons of this show before Fox would be like, yeah, try it, network television story
Right.
arc, because that doesn't really happen.
No.
Nowadays, network television is like the A story is different in every episode, but then there's like a B
Like the
story
through line,
that goes. It's like you'll check in with these characters a couple of times, and they'll be on a journey. But if you haven't seen the episodes before, it still makes sense.
Right.
So it would be interesting to see if the Orville ever goes down that path.
It would be neat, and I don't know how they would do it almost, because I feel like I don't know if it would work for their show,
Yeah, I mean, if Brendan Braga like screws it up the way that he screwed up the Enterprise, then it would be third season, where he would like arc it, and then it would be the worst, and then fourth season would be taken over by Manny Cotto, and it would be the best. So I mean, that could happen.
Yeah.
I had a couple of thoughts. One, that the Orvilles, maybe it's the element of comedy in the Orville that doesn't that I never feel like they're lost. I never feel like something bad's going to happen on the Orville. Whereas, even though I know things are always going to work out on the other shows, bad things, worse things have happened on the other shows, but I still feel a little bit of anxiousness on the other shows, even Discovery.
Well, I mean, Tasha Yar died in the first, like, pretty early in
season 1 or 2.
I think
she dies in season 1.
Season 1.
Yeah, she wasn't enjoying the show.
And the thing about the multi-episode arcs is that you do become more invested. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more at stake for you as a viewer. And maybe if the Orville did that, maybe it would feel like. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the Orville just the way it is, but that element is not there for me. That was there for me in the.
Well, I'm wondering, on the topic of multi-episode arcs, I'm wondering if the reason this season has been cut short by one episode, I wonder if it's because episode 12 and 13 are a two-parter.
Ah, okay.
And if the Orville wasn't greenlit for a second season, it would have given us part 1 and part 2, and then, there's the end of your show.
Sure.
But since it is greenlit for season 2, they were like, okay, this 13-episode season is now a 12-episode season.
And they're part 2 is gonna be.
It's a cliffhanger.
It might be a cliffhanger. I mean, the preview for next week's episode looks like it could be a big enough story that they're going to leave you hanging. But I'm hoping that's what's going on. Because the end of season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation was supposed to be a two-parter. And then there was a writer's strike, and then the Neutral Zone episode, which was supposed to be about the Borg, just wound up being only about Romulans and Mystery, who took away the Neutral Zone inhabitants. But the fact that we're now getting possibly a proper two-parter. That's what I'm hoping for. With the first season of the Orville is like that redemption of what didn't quite happen in TNG.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like he's like really tapping into trying to do some things, like tapping into things that have already happened, so we're familiar with it, and then trying to like hang something else on it.
Yeah, something modern and new and maybe better in some cases.
Yeah.
Well, on the topic of which is better, can we? Hey, there we go. Time to go to Red Alert and time to talk about whether this episode trekked it or wrecked it.
I hadn't thought about it.
It's going to be a snap decision then.
Sonia, this is the
show. You took the show to all these elements of the show. I don't think about it that way anymore. I think it trekked it for me.
Yeah?
It started anti-Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah.
But then it in a way explored, those big ideas that Star Trek did eventually. I would have liked certain aspects of it fleshed out a little more, but I have to say I would lean toward Trek it.
Okay.
Okay.
Vanya, what about you?
Yeah, it's easy. It's trekked it. But for me, it's easy. And I feel like I mean, there are some things that are definitely derivative of like the Voyager episode, definitely. But I mean, it's its own thing still. It's cool. It's fun.
Yeah. I think the fact that I was not sure until the very end who was going to become the chief engineer, because you always knew B'Elanna Torres was going to become the chief engineer because that guy nobody knows is the other person. But Norm Macdonald does the voice of Yaphet.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the whole time I was like, well, this guy was just like Seth MacFarlane's assistant. This guy's Norm frigging Macdonald. Could go either way. Yeah. And so that suspense that I was in took me out of the sense of it being totally derivative. It felt like it was riffing as opposed to derivative. And for that reason, as well as all the themes that come out of, TNG, Voyager, these really great themes, I've got to say this trekked it. This trekked it hard for me. And I'm glad that this episode was as Next Generation as it was. Yeah. Because after the episode we had a couple of weeks ago, I feel like this one just like brought it right back into feeling like all these people are doing great things. They're all like they're all in their lane. And it was neat to see, Finn was back in action just doing her thing, and she was like, he can do it cleaner than I can. And so it was like nice to see her doing her job and just being great.
And it's something we asked for too, actually. Like, in previous weeks on the show, where it was like, what's happening with Lamar? Is he gonna? What's
gonna happen with that guy?
Like we saw that thing, and but he wasn't like didn't really do anything, and now we got something.
Yeah.
Like,
I would have liked to see more of him in this episode, but we'll see more of him now because he's
well. I mean, the thing about LeVar Burton was that he felt like on the bridge he was always just like the guy who chirped up once a scene to say one little thing and that was it.
Yeah.
And the reason he was excited about the idea of being like in charge of this other section was that he would have elements of plot that he could like move forward and he'd be challenged as an actor. And I feel like that's something that happens on The Next Generation. And you knew that LeVar Burton had those chops.
Yeah.
He had that ability.
Yeah, he had that acting gravitas. Yeah.
I'm wondering what we'll see out of Jay Lee now. Because he is not the strongest actor on the show. But I'd like to see him do more. Get better at this craft because I think he's got a really cool vibe.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see him like really get into his lane and kick some ass.
Yeah, that'd be fun. In fact, I feel like the actor that's doing the least is probably the best actor. Scott Grimes is like probably the best actor and doing the least.
He really is. Yeah, he's just
leg. I'm sorry.
That's a brand new leg.
I mean, he's like really fulfilling the comedy element, but it's not like he's not like having to do as many tight rope kind of things.
Well, hopefully he gets a cat just like Data did after Geordi left him.
Oh, right, yeah.
So it'd be kind of neat if he gets a nice little little cat.
Can you imagine?
Bridge cat. If there's just a cat wandering around the set,
tapping on things.
That would be great because Spot never really hung out on the bridge, so it would be fun to see that. That would be so weird.
Bridge. into my ready room.
Right? Just watch him wander around. Oh, man. So next week's episode looks pretty heavy. I mean, I actually managed to track down the preview for next week's episode. Right. And, yeah, they're kind of teasing that a character might die, which is interesting.
Orville?
Yeah, which, I mean, I assume they won't, but hopefully, I mean, maybe there'll be some genuine stakes, and we'll wonder if somebody dies.
Like if somebody dies on
like, what if Alara died? You should be like, no. I don't feel like there's anybody expendable that I'd be okay with dying.
Well...
And the thing about them dying is that it makes room.
Yeah,
Worf kind of didn't do anything until Tasha Yar died, and then Worf had a proper job.
That was like a perfect.
Yeah, that worked out well.
Because you're kind of like, okay.
It's like, okay, he can do more than just sit around being Klingon.
And then he can
fully
gelled. Yeah. Where everybody had their spot and their responsibility,
Because I guess there really wasn't. There wasn't like a chief of security character on The Next Generation that you would be like, oh yeah, that guy who's in charge of like firing phasers and beating people up, and like that was Yar's job, and there was never anybody who had that job beforehand, and it's Alara's job now, and if she were to die, it's not like there's somebody else on the bridge doing nothing,
right?
Although I don't know what Bortus does.
Yeah, exactly.
He's
a bit like Spock, but then like Isaac's like Spock. Bortus's job really is to be captain when the ex-husband, ex-wife leave. Like his job is basically just backup captain.
Why are they always leaving at the same time?
I don't know. He's number 2.
So that Bortus can be. Yeah. They're like, well, we gotta throw Bortus a bone.
Yeah, right.
Let's both get out of here.
Something to do. Yeah. All right, well, let us know in the comments on YouTube as well as on Facebook. Let us know, did you think it wrecked it? And we're really looking forward to seeing what you think about next week. So it will be the season finale next week of The Orville. And, it's going to be really interesting to see if this is a two-parter, that they're just going to best of both worlds us, and we'll be like, no! Does he make it?
That was so exciting.
Right? Oh, it was wild. Although, apparently, in Best of Both Worlds, they had no idea how to end that.
Right.
Unlike this one, where they've already shot, and it's, like, ready to go.
Right.
So there is an ending for, if there's a cliffhanger next week, they already know.
I want a cliffhanger.
I'd like it. It feels so Star Trek-y to have a cliffhanger. Well, and Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
Because, that was a pretty damn good way to end the first season. Just murder the highest-ranking person and hope we come back for season 2.
I haven't seen Battlestar Galactica. I'm sorry.
It's
sorry.
okay.
Gotta watch it. I know. Gotta watch it, right?
Yeah.
Like
in fact,
Wire,
on the topic of Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, and we're talking even what we were talking about.
Baltar.
I was thinking about his guy.
Who plays Baltar? Sorry. Sorry to interrupt.
James Callis plays Baltar.
No, I was thinking about him a lot as far as the Lamar storyline too, because this is a character who because he was from working class, and he disguised himself
to be upper class.
Yeah, to be upper class. He did the opposite of what Lamar did.
Yeah,
it's not Star Trek. But
but it had Ronald D. Moore. It was better Star Trek than most episodes of Voyager.
It was darker DS9.
Yeah.
He went further.
Yeah, it was really everything.
Yeah, you can get darker than DS9, that's for sure.
Well, it was Ronald D. Moore was that was DS9 was the blueprint for.
Yeah. And it was if there wasn't a network in the way of letting me do all the things I want to do.
Right.
He would have made Deep Space Nine into what Battlestar Galactica was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it had all the religious elements and all that stuff in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You should watch it.
Yeah, Battlestar Galactica. Pretty damn good.
I think we should do bonus episodes. For example, looking back at the old shows and analyzing, say, the way they ended or the.
Oh yeah, well let's not talk about the way Battlestar Galactica ended because
no.
that makes people very unhappy. Very unhappy. And some people have never seen it.
Some people have never seen it and they don't want to know.
So
are there existing Star Trek episodes that you're like, oh, did they Trek it? Did that even Trek it?
Right? I don't know. If we did episodes of Voyager, did it Trek it or wreck it? I think most of them would wreck it. Most Voyager episodes wreck it.
You're going to anger a lot of people.
Most
I'm surprised you didn't. Enterprise.
Almost a whole season of Enterprise wrecked it. Season 3, episode 1 to 22, wreck the whole time. Season 3 of Enterprise.
It's so hurty.
It's the worst.
It hurts.
I don't know what it is about DS9, for example, because really it's dated in its decor and everything, but it's still so engaging.
That's what's
my God,
so
beautiful.
Something, but because it's I guess it was set just perfectly for itself back then. That everything, so many of the elements come together beautifully. That even the episodes that they got 26 episodes in one season. They maybe they lost a bit of steam. At 2/3 into the season, or some of the episodes are not as they don't sparkle as much. Even those episodes are great. I'm totally biased.
Which is interesting because the episodes of Battlestar Galactica that were like, bring in new people with this episode that's a standalone episode are usually the worst. They're almost always the worst. The Woman King pops up as a terrible episode in my head because it kind of has nothing to do with the plot that's going on, and Black Market. They're like two of the worst episodes, which is a shame because two really great actors are the leads of both of those. But they just don't, like, those episodes don't sparkle. Those actors are way better in other episodes.
That's true.
But, yeah.
I thought Battlestar Galactica was one big long story arc. It's not?
It is.
It is, okay.
I mean, Ronald D. Moore didn't know how to end it when he started it. So it's not like Straczynski where he was like, I'm going to begin the show like this, I'm going to end it like this, y'all get out of my way. It's more of a, like, this is a really great premise. Where am I going to go? And then he eventually figured out where to go. Okay. And you can kind of feel where he figured it out.
Yeah, but it is one giant journey.
Yeah, it's got a built-in ending where it's like, let's find Earth. So it's like, I guess you're either going to successfully find Earth or die. There's like no other option. That's sort of the game. All right, so now that Trek It or Wreck It has turned into everything Ronald D. Moore has ever touched in his life.
Thanks for sticking around, folks.
And thanks for commenting live. Thanks for being a part of the show. You guys make this so much more fun because there's more than just 3 Trekkies. There's all of you. So thanks, and we'll see you next week.